Have you ever wondered what your ancestors were doing? And what if I told you that the history of an entire people, as we learned it in school, is only the tip of the iceberg, and that beneath it lies a secret capable of turning upside down our perception of borders, empires, and even who we really are? Today, on the channel, we will uncover one of the most tangled cases in European history. This is a DNA detective story whose main character is the Bulgarian people. A people whose name sounds Eastern, with a Turkic tone, whose language is Slavic, yet whose appearance is typically European. How is this possible? We were always told that Bulgaria is a Balkan country, heir to powerful kingdoms, and the birthplace of the Cyrillic alphabet. We were shown a simple diagram and presented it as a final truth. The nomadic Bulgars conquered the local Slavs, mixed with them, and created a state. But what if this neat theory is only a convenient myth? What if the genetic code of modern Bulgarians preserves the memory of people who were long believed to have disappeared? Of people who lived on these lands thousands of years before the arrival of the Slavs and the Bulgars. Prepare yourself for a shocking journey into the past, because today we will decipher the genetic code of the Bulgarians. The answers we will uncover will make you look differently not only at the history of the Balkans, but at the history of all Europe. This is a mystery that remained unsolved for centuries. Historians could not crack it, but today we possess the key they did not have: DNA. So who are you really, Bulgarians? Let us begin our investigation. To understand the scale of the mystery, we must first draw the picture offered to us by official history. The 6th century after Christ. The Byzantine Empire is a colossus with feet of clay, and its Balkan possessions are bursting at the seams. From the north, Slavic tribes roll in wave after wave. They settle, mix with the remnants of the local population, and gradually slavicize vast territories. Then, from the east, from the wild steppes near the Sea of Azov, comes the horseman Khan Aspara, leading a horde of Bulgar nomads. They are a Turkic people, fearsome warriors whose name inspires terror. They cross the Danube, defeat the Byzantine legions, and found their own state, the First Bulgarian Empire. The official version states the following: a small but warlike Bulgar elite subjugates the numerous Slavic tribes and the remnants of the local population. Over time, the Bulgars dissolve into the Slavic Sea, leaving behind only the name Bulgarians and an aristocratic elite. They adopt the Slavic language, accept Christianity, and become part of the European world. It sounds logical and simple. Too simple to be true. This version, formulated in the 19th century, became an unshakable dogma, yet it left far too many questions unanswered. Why did such a powerful and unique culture arise precisely on these lands? Why does the Bulgarian language, although Slavic, possess features that other Slavic languages do not have? And the main question, one history could not answer for a long time. Who lived on these lands before the arrival of the Slavs and the Bulgars, and where did those people go? The Romans and Greeks called them Thracians. A great and mysterious people, contemporaries of the ancient Greeks. Spartacus, the rebellious gladiator, was Thracian. Orpheus, the mythical singer whose music moved stones, came from Thrace. They left behind incredible gold treasures and monumental tombs, yet written sources are almost non-existent. It was believed that the Thracians had been completely assimilated or destroyed, wiped from the face of the earth by new peoples. Their history was over. That is what we were told. But what if that is not true? What if they did not disappear, but simply changed their name? And this is where our DNA detective story begins. The central mystery of our investigation can be formulated as follows. If Bulgarians are descendants of Slavs and Turkic Bulgars, then their genetic portrait should be predictable. We should see a mixture of typically Slavic and Central Asian genetic markers. That is exactly what scientists expected when the first large-scale genetic studies in Bulgaria began. But what they discovered became a true scientific sensation. It blew apart the established historical model. The genetic code of the Bulgarians turned out to be a box filled with surprises. Yes, there is a Slavic component. Yes, the Central Asian, specifically Bulgar, component is also present, though in unexpectedly small doses. But the main, dominant element in this DNA mosaic turned out to be a third one, the most unexpected of all, an ancient, autochthonous Balkan substrate. The genes of those very Thracians believed to be extinct. It was a true bombshell. A hypothesis previously voiced only by a handful of bold historians suddenly received the strongest possible confirmation from the laboratory. Bulgarians turned out not to be merely Slavs who adopted the name of Turkic conquerors. They turned out to be genetic heirs of an ancient civilization that had lived on these lands for thousands of years. The Thracians first began speaking Slavic and later adopted the name Bulgarians. Can you imagine the scale of such a reversal? It would be like discovering that modern Italians are not genetically descended from Romans, but are direct heirs of the Etruscans who simply ended up speaking Latin. The old theory was cracking. But how could this be proven? A claim alone is not enough. We need evidence. And we will find it by searching in the very heart of the Bulgarian gene pool, in the male Y chromosomes, passed from father to son like an ancient lineage. Thus comes our first clue: male DNA lines. Male lines are like a genealogical tree stretching thousands of years back through the paternal line. What do we see among Bulgarians? The picture turned out to be astonishing and completely inconsistent with the classic Slavic-Turkic theory. Let us proceed in order. Let us begin with what we expected. Slavic markers. Haplogroup R1a, often called Aryan or Eastern European, is indeed present among Bulgarians, but its frequency is only around 15 to 17%. This is far lower than among the northern Slavic neighbors, such as Poles or Russians, where it reaches 50 to 60%. This is already the first warning sign. The Slavs were here. Their genetic trace is clear, but they were not the overwhelming majority that assimilated everyone else. They were only one component, and not the most important one. And what about the Bulgars themselves, the trace of Khan Asparuh's horsemen? Scientists searched for markers typical of Central Asia, the homeland of Turkic peoples. These are haplogroups C, Q, and N, and they did find them. But their share turned out to be vanishingly small, around 0.5%. It is a genetic whisper, not the thunderous shout of conquerors. It is the trace of an elite, a drop in the ocean. It becomes obvious. The Bulgars gave their name to the state, founded the first ruling dynasty, but they did not radically change the local gene pool. Their contribution was cultural and political rather than genetic. And here we reach the most important point. If the Slavic and Bulgar components are not the core, then what is the core of the Bulgarian gene pool? Then the main suspects of our investigation step onto the stage. First comes haplogroup EB13. Bulgarians have one of the highest concentrations of this haplogroup in Europe, reaching between 20 and 25%. This is a typically Balkan marker that originated right here, on these lands, during the Neolithic era. It is associated with the pre-Hellenic populations of the Balkans, with the Pelasgians, and above all with the Thracians. Seeing such a high concentration is like finding direct genetic proof that the roots of the Bulgarians run deep into the history of Europe. It is a genetic shield that withstood later waves of migration. But that is not all. The second most important component is haplogroup I2A, especially its subclade IP37. Bulgarians have around 20% of it. This is also one of the oldest European markers, linked to the first modern humans who arrived in Europe after the Ice Age. In the Balkans, this haplogroup survived dramatic climatic upheavals and became the foundation for many later peoples. Its high frequency among Bulgarians and other southern Slavs, such as Serbs, Croats, and Bosnians, speaks of a deep autochthonous base. Finally, the third powerful lineage appears, haplogroup R1b, typical of Western Europe. Among Bulgarians it is present at around 10 to 15%. Its presence is associated with migrations of the Bronze Age, most likely connected to those same Indo-Europeans who brought the Thracian language to these lands. So what do we have in the end? If we combine these three pre-Slavic components, EB13, I2A, and R1b, we obtain more than half, and in some estimates up to 2/3, of the entire Bulgarian male gene pool. This is a staggering result. It completely turns the old model upside down. It turns out that the Slavic tribes who arrived in the 6th and 7th centuries did not settle empty lands. They came to a territory already densely populated by a genetically stable population, descendants of the Thracians and other ancient Balkan peoples. And the newcomers did not assimilate the locals. On the contrary, they dissolved into them, giving them their language. This was not a population replacement, but a cultural transformation. But if the male lines already tell such an unexpected story, then what will the female lines reveal? All of this points to an incredible genetic continuity through the maternal line on the Balkan Peninsula. The descendants of the first Neolithic farmers, and even of the much older Paleolithic population, did not disappear. They were always here. But the most interesting part is the comparison. In the mitochondrial DNA of the Central Asian Bulgars, among modern Bulgarians, such lineages are practically absent. Their proportion tends toward 0. This is critical evidence. It tells us that the horde of Khan Aspara consisted almost entirely of male warriors. They arrived without their women and, after founding a state, took local women as wives, Slavic women and, to an even greater extent, descendants of Thracian women. This is the classic model of conquest, where a male elite overlays a local female substrate. The conquerors bring their power, but it is the local women who give birth to and raise the next generation, passing on not only their genes, but also their cultural codes. And what about the Slavic contribution through the female line? It exists, but it does not dominate. It is woven into an already rich palette of ancient Balkan mitochondrial lineages. This reveals a hidden historical drama. Imagine the picture. Slavic tribes in the 6th century move south. These are not just armies, but entire peoples on the move. Men, women, children. They settle in the Balkans. Then come the Bulgars of Aspara, an organized military force composed mainly of men. They create a political structure, but the genetic core, especially its female half, remains the same, local and Thracian. A complex process of synthesis unfolds. Slavic men mix with local women. Then the elite of Bulgar warriors arrives and takes wives from this already mixed Slavic Thracian population. As a result, after several generations, the genetic traces of the small number of Bulgars are washed away, while the ancient autochthonous gene pool is preserved. This explains the main paradox. Why Bulgarians carry a Turkic name, speak a Slavic language, and are, above all, genetic descendants of the pre-Slavic population of the Balkans. Language turned out to be the cultural glue that united the different groups. The Slavic language, simpler and more understandable for all, became the language of interethnic communication, our lingua franca that gradually displaced the remnants of the Thracian language and the Turkic language of the Bulgar elite. And the name Bulgarians was preserved as a polytonym, the name of the citizens of the new strong state, and over time it became an ethnonym, the name of an entire people. Genetics shows that the Bulgarian people are not the result of a simple mixture of two peoples, but a complex alloy of at least three main components, in which the ancient Thracian layer is not merely the foundation, but the load-bearing walls of the entire structure. Now that we have genetic evidence, let us see how this relates to culture. After all, a people is not only genes, but also language and traditions. And here we find striking confirmation of our theory. The Bulgarian language does indeed belong to the Slavic group, but it stands out clearly. Linguists speak of the so-called Balkan linguistic union. This is a unique phenomenon in which languages of different origins, Bulgarian, Romanian, Albanian, and Greek, acquired common grammatical features due to long coexistence. For example, in Bulgarian, unlike all other Slavic languages, grammatical cases have almost disappeared, but a definite article has appeared, placed at the end of the word. Many scholars believe that these and other features are traces of the substrate of those ancient languages spoken before the arrival of the Slavs. It is like a grammatical ghost. The Thracian language continues to live on in the Slavic speech of the Bulgarians. This is yet another piece of evidence that the Slavic language was imposed upon a powerful non-Slavic foundation. And what about traditions? In Bulgarian folk culture, elements have been preserved that have no analogues in the Slavic world, but repeat ancient Thracian cults. The most striking example is the kakeri. These are masked men who, at the beginning of spring, perform ritual dances to drive away evil and call for fertility. In their masks and rituals, scholars see direct evidence of the heritage of the Dionysian mysteries of ancient Thrace. This is neither Slavic nor Turkic heritage. It is the voice of that very ancient land, continuing to sound through the centuries. Or consider Nestonarstvo, the unique ritual of walking on burning embers, preserved only in a few villages in the Strandra Mountains. Its roots also go back to the deeply pagan, pre-Christian antiquity of the Balkans. These cultural islands show that assimilation was never complete. Ancient culture did not die. It went underground, into the memory of the people, and merged with the new Slavic and Christian traditions, creating a unique and inimitable synthesis. Look at famous Bulgarians. For example, Hristo Stoichkov, the legendary footballer. In his fiery, explosive temperament, many see an echo of that same Thracian passion, an unrestrained energy about which the ancient Greeks wrote. Genetics, language, culture, all the evidence points in one direction. The Bulgarian people are a living monument of ancient Thrace, dressed in Slavic clothing and bearing the name of Turkic warriors. What historical phenomenon are we observing? It is unique. It is a case in which the conquered and seemingly assimilated population ultimately genetically and culturally absorbs its conquerors. An effect that can be called a genetic sponge. The ancient population of the Balkans, represented mainly by the Thracians, absorbed waves of newcomers, first Slavs and then Bulgars. It took from them what was useful for survival and development. From the Slavs, a simple and flexible language that became a tool of unity. From the Bulgars, a powerful state organization and a military elite capable of defending the land, above all against Byzantium. It was a brilliant historical compromise. Instead of disappearing, the autochthonous population preserved itself, sacrificing language but retaining its genetic foundation. And the name Bulgarians became the symbol of this new unity. It ceased to mean belonging to a Turkic horde and came to mean belonging to a new, powerful nation born at the crossroads of three worlds. Precisely this synthesis determined the future fate of Bulgaria. It gave it extraordinary resilience. Bulgaria survived centuries of foreign domination and preserved its identity. Why? Because that identity was not based on the fragile idea of blood purity, but on deep, millennia-old roots in this land. This ancient Thracian substrate became a genetic and cultural foundation that no empire was able to destroy. Bulgarians survived because they were not strangers on this land. They were its flesh and blood. Understanding this phenomenon completely changes our view of Balkan history. This is not just a story of wars and conquests. It is a story of survival, adaptation, and synthesis. A story of how an ancient people managed to find new life under a new name and in a new language, while preserving their deepest essence, their genetic code. We began our investigation with a simple but shocking question: who are the Bulgarians really? And now, after passing through the labyrinths of history and genetics, we are ready to answer. Bulgarians are not Slavs conquered by Turks, nor Turks dissolved among Slavs. Bulgarians are, first and foremost, descendants of the most ancient population of the Balkans, people in whose veins flows the blood of the Thracians. They adopted the Slavic language as an instrument of unity. They took the name from the Bulgars and statehood as shield and sword. But they remained faithful to their genetic foundation and to this land, where their ancestors lived for thousands of years. The history of the Bulgarian people is a perfect example that a nation is not pure and does not arise from a single root. It is a complex mosaic in which every element matters. A living organism that constantly changes, absorbs the new, yet preserves its ancient core. The DNA detective investigation into the origin of the Bulgarians closes here, but it leaves us with a deep philosophical thought. Every nation is a mystery. And the key to that mystery often lies not in the loud chronicles of kings and commanders, but in the quiet whisper of genes, which preserve the memory of thousands of generations of nameless ancestors. By studying DNA, we study not only biology. We study the history of life itself, the history of humanity in all its astonishing diversity. Thank you for being with us in this investigation. If you too wonder how we can dive into the mysteries of the past, subscribe to the channel, like the video, and turn on notifications so you do not miss new DNA detective stories. Write in the comments the history of which people you would like us to unravel together next time.